All right, so now that we have our R code up and running in RStudio, I'm going to walk you through what this code is showing you, what this code means. And I want to spend a lot of time on this in the first section because a lot of this will be new to you right now. So the first thing that you'll notice when you're looking at our practice code for this week is that there's a bunch of green code that has the number sign on the left hand side. And so this green code these are comments. These are just code that or little comments that I wrote to myself that R won't actually be running. It won't actually be telling R to do anything with this code. So anytime you want to make a comment to yourself, you can just write, put in a number sign and then write whatever you want. And R won't recognize that as some code to run. It'll just say, oh yeah, we have this comment here. And this is particularly helpful when you're doing a bunch of analyses and you want to remind yourself what you did so you can look at it later and understand what was going on. And so in this, I just kind of have what we're doing, the main things that we're learning in these different sections. And then I also have all these little explanations for you to tell you what's going on. And this is how you're going to get a lot of your information about how to use R, this in your book. And so as you'll notice, this is the pane where your code goes. This is your source pane. And it'll keep an R script for you so that you can go back and you can run your code again. Now the console pane is where R communicates what it did with you. So you can see I have all these things that I was asking R to do, and it's telling me what it was doing. You can also write code in the console pane. So I use this a lot for calculators, but you can also use it for other code that you want to run, but you don't necessarily need it to be in your full R script. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to learn how to do in R is how to get information about the different functions that R has. So R has all these functions that do all these important things for us, that can transform our data. We're using functions left and right, but sometimes we don't know what a function is. So we need a little more information about what it is and how to use it. And so this help piece of code will tell you what a function does. So anytime you're wondering about a function, you can do help, parentheses, and then type in the name of the function. In this instance, the function is sum. And so we're going to run this code. And the first way I'll show you how to run code is just to place your cursor in the line that has the code that you want, so line 30, and then click run. And you'll see over there, it comes up with this help page for the function sum. You can do the same thing for mean. Oh, tells us how to calculate a mean. Great. So in that instance, I place my cursor in there and then I hit run. That's probably the easiest way. If you want, you can highlight it and hit run. It'll do the same thing. And then there's also shortcuts that you can use. I use shortcuts all the time, keyboard shortcuts that is. For a Mac, it's Command Enter, and it'll do the same thing. And sorry for the PC people. I don't have a PC, so I'm not quite sure what it is. Okay. So as you see in my notes, you can ask for help in the source pane like we did here, or you can do it in the console pane down here. And usually when I'm asking for help, I'll write it in the console pane because I just need to have that code once, and I just need to tell R to use it this one time, and then it'll tell me what it is. I don't necessarily want it in my script. Okay, now another way you can get help is you can just do a question mark and then put your function after it. So again, it'll tell us the same thing, and you can do the same in your console pane. So here, as I mentioned, this is R talking to you, but it's also showing us what we asked R to do. So it shows us that we asked R to tell us what sum is, both in the console pane and in the source pane. Okay. So in R, we're going to be creating a lot of objects. And we're going to create our first object here right now called X. And X is a vector, so it's just a series of similar things all in a kind of like a list. So in R, when we want to make an object, we write the name of the object, and then we use this symbol, these two symbols together, to tell R that this X is equal to this list of numbers. So we're going to set X equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 10. So I'm going to run our code, and then we see, oh, it made a little object in our environment pane that's called X, and it's a list of numbers from 1 to 10. So as I mentioned, X is a vector, and this is because it's a collection of data that are of the same type. It's just a bunch of numbers altogether. And now, if we want, we can use some of those functions that we were looking at before to transform our vector. So we can transform all of, we can ask R to do a bunch of different things to our vector. For example, we can ask it to take the mean. Oh, 5.5. There's our answer. So just took all of these different numbers and gave us the mean. Now, here, we're asking it, it looks like we're asking it to do the same thing. We're just saying, give me the mean of X. But there's a key difference. Here it's lowercase, and here it's uppercase. And you'll notice when it's uppercase, we get an error. We can see the error down here. It says object X not found. And that's because R is sensitive to capitalizations. So we named our object X, and you can actually see when we highlight it all the areas where I write about X, and this one isn't capitalized. And then here, the capital X is capitalized or is highlighted in all the areas where I talked about it there. So that's a good way to check to make sure you have the right object. All right, so we have to keep it pretty consistent when we name an object in terms of capitalization, otherwise we'll get an error. And you'll notice too, this error is not very descriptive. It just says that this object isn't found. It doesn't say, oh, did you mean to have a lowercase because you have this other object that is a lowercase x? R is not smart in that way. It's not going to be like when we search for Google and it gives us a suggestion. It's extremely literal. And then yeah, as I write here, these kinds of really silly human errors, these are just, that's an arbitrary number, I made that up, but it's the cause of most problems in R, especially when you're starting out. Okay, so now let's try doing the same-ish task where we're asking for the mean for X, but we accidentally put a period on the end of it. Oh no, another error. So again, it's like, we don't know what this period is. And it's not saying, did you mean to not have a period? Because that's really close to an actual function. It just is dumb, and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about here. And then if you take that out, it gives you the right answer. So no periods. Make sure your capitalizations are consistent. All right. Now we're going to make a new vector called x plus 1. And we're going to do that by transforming our old vector and then telling R to add +1 to each of the numbers in our vector. And remember, this is our equal sign, essentially, and we're calling it x plus 1. We could call it anything. We could call it the flying spaghetti monster. We could call it the pink flamingo, whatever we want, as long as there's no spaces in it, at least. Okay, so great. Here we see x plus 1, and we added 1 to each of those numbers in our previous vector. And then, yeah, you can check your work. Ah, we got another, it's instead of 5.5, it's 6.5 now. So great. Now, you can do all these other mathematical operations kind of the same way. So you can take your vector, you could subtract 1 from all the numbers in your vector using the minus. You can multiply. It's my bad spelling. I don't know how to spell anything anymore. So you can multiply with a star, and it'll give you the multiplication of every number in your vector x by 123. You can divide with the slash there, and exponents with the caret. Now, oh, and then also PEMDAS applies, just like your math classes from high school and whatnot. That's your order of operations. Okay, so one thing you'll notice is we got all these answers here when we asked it to. That one's a little confusing, but let's take the exponent of x. So we want to take everything in our vector x to the second degree, and there's our answer. But if we look at x itself, x is unchanged. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so all the way up to 10. It's not changing x with this formula. And that's because we didn't make an object. We could have made an object if we wanted. Call it x2. And then we would have an object with that input that we wanted, taking everything up to 2, to the second degree. But if we're just running it like this, we're not telling x to make a new object. Okay, now we're going to get a little more fancy here, and we're going to make a data frame out of 2 vectors. So we'll rename x. We're going to name it PID, which stands for participant ID. I use this a lot in our data frames. So each participant has like a label, a numeric label that goes with them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just a way of organizing your data. So now we are going to make a new object called PID, and we're going to, x is going to be equal to PID. So there you go. You have your object over there. It's the same as x. That's going to be the first column in our data frame. Now, let's make, oh yeah, so we're going to remove, I'll show you how to remove objects that you don't need. So you can take this RM, that means remove, copy it, paste it into your console, and then hit enter. And it takes out these ones that we don't need. In fact, we can also take out x2, because that was just an example. So now we only have PID, and we can keep our little global environment clean here because we don't need that x anymore. Awesome. That's a perfect example of code that would go in the console pane instead of in the source pane, because I only need to use it once. Okay, now I'm going to make another vector called weight. So this is going to represent the different weight of our participants. So we're going to call it weight. We're going to use our equal sign, And let's see what happens. We're already kind of getting the idea that there's an error right there, right? So something's wrong with our code. We have these little errors here too. And then, boom, after we run it, we see, oh, it has this unexpected comma. It doesn't like what we did. And the reason why is because we forgot something. We forgot to put a C before the list in our vector, like we did up here. Here we have that C that says combine all those numbers into one vector. It's just a little quirk of R, just the way, it's just the language of R. There's little weird things like that anytime you're learning a new computer language. So the C means combine the following elements, and this is how we tell R to make a vector. So if we add the C and we run that code, the only difference is now there's a C, and it liked it. R liked it. Great. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to tell R to make a specific object called a data frame by combining these two vectors, PID and weight. So we're going to label it data, super creative there. Again, it could be anything you want. It could be sea slugs, it could be my favorite TV show, I don't know. And then we're going to use this function called data.frame, and that will tell R to take these two vectors, PID and weight, and make a data frame out of it. Aha! Now in our global environment, we have a data frame, a little tiny baby data frame, super cute. This tells you the number of the row, the first row, second row, so on and so forth. And it matches up with PID in this case, and then we have our variable called weight, and that's everybody's weight. Okay, awesome. Yay. So a data frame is just a bunch of vectors all mushed together, basically, into a little kind of matrix. All right, now let's kick it up a notch, and let's download a file. And we're going to do some sort of run some basic functions on this file that we downloaded. So we're going to download the file from Canvas in that week 1 page. Download the height weight dataset. Okay, let's download it. So I have it in my download folder, but I'm going to open it using R. I'm not going to open it on its own. And this is the code we'll be using to open our data files. And they have to be CSV files in particular. So let's run that code. And it'll open up your folders that you have available to you. So I will click on download and find height weight data. Aha, perfect. Okay, perfect. So I downloaded it off of Canvas, and then I ran this code to tell R to make an object called height weight and make it by reading this CSV file from outside, from my computer. And then if we click on height weight over here, we see, it worked. This is essentially our PID. Everybody has a number. Then we have the height of everyone, and we have the weight. All right, so if we want to see the data frame, essentially I just clicked on it and it showed us our data frame. But you can also run some code using view and then the name of your data frame. That's just a nice easy way. There's usually a way to do it, point and click, and a way to do it with code. And as you get a little more comfortable with it, it'll be more and more convenient to do it using code. Okay. now we have this other function called summary. So we're going to write our function, summary, and then we're going to tell it to summarize our new data frame. So we want a brief summary of our data set, and we'll use the function called summary. And it kind of just tells you the minimum score on our variables. Our x is just our PID, our height or weight. The minimum, mean, median, max. And if we wanted, we could do the same function on our other data frame called data. So don't worry too much right now about all this. We'll get into the details later. But what I want you to learn right now is kind of this act of using a function and then using it on an appropriate object. In this case, it's a data frame. Sometimes the functions take different objects. If we wanted to know, we could write summary over here, and it'll tell us. Again, this might be a little gibberishy right now, but over time it'll start to make more sense. Don't worry about that yet. Okay, so if we wanted to see maybe something like a correlation, we can use this core function. And notice here we're starting to get a little more complicated with what we're telling R how to do, or what to do. So we want to correlate height and weight. But if we just type in core, which tells it to correlate height and weight, it says, oh, we don't have that. That's not part, you don't have this object called height. And it's going to do the same thing with weight. It doesn't recognize it. Or maybe it recognizes weight. Yeah, it does, because it's there. The reason is because these are names of variables in our data frame. So R is not smart. It won't figure that out on its own. We need to tell R to look into our height weight data frame and find the vector called height. And we do that with this, this money symbol, essentially. So we want to correlate height and weight. So R, look in the height weight data frame, find the variable height. Then look again in the height weight data frame and find the variable weight. Ah, look at that. Really, really, really high correlation. Again, if you're not familiar with correlations yet, don't worry. We'll get into that more later. But I wanted to just get you guys comfortable with figuring out how to ask for specific vectors in a data frame. And you do this always by the name of the data frame, and then money, and then the name of the object. And you'll see, oh look, it's telling us it knows already PID versus weight. Cool. It can tell that you're asking it to look in that data frame, and it knows what vectors you have in there. That is a very common thing you'll be doing a lot in R. Okay, we can do the same thing with the plot function. We'll talk more about that later too, just getting a little teaser here. Ah, look at that. Little plot there for your height and your weight. Fun. Okay, so, and you're using the exact same format there of the data frame, money sign, and then what vector or what variable you want to ask R to use. All right, so that is the first chunk of code. Your career as an R hacker has officially begun. And again, come to the R Hacker Weekly Lab session to get some help on this, get some things clarified. If it feels a little overwhelming right now, just sit with that kind of discomfort and it'll sort of start to all click in as you go along. And you're always welcome to ask R for help in the with your help functions, and you can always Google things as well. But some of this will just start to click in a little bit more as we go along.